Everybody's had a first meeting we had since November. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and do some of this before we stand up. We're gonna call, a roll call to see if we got a quorum. Mr. Huffine. Here. Mr. Bernesh. Here. Chair Dean Ward's here. Mr. Wooten. Here. Mr. Bass. Here. Mr. Strickland. Here. Mr. Bailey is absent tonight. He did call and, he's under the weather.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. If everyone please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's gonna be a short agenda tonight. I don't think we'll be here, extremely long, but we'll be here till we get all the business conducted tonight. If someone's here tonight that would like to speak before a particular matter, you will be called upon to, come forward and state your name and address, and you'll be allowed to speak. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from November 21st.
So move.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Before we go on to the new business, I think we got one little piece of housekeeping that we need to take care of. Mr. Wooten's, being voted in. I think there was a technicality we were supposed to take care of in November, to redo it again.
Did we, I thought we took care of it in November.
We do,
Yeah,
in the meeting.
Then,
it was the meeting before when we had the issue with it. But no, we got it taken care of in November. So Mr. Wooten is officially the vice chair.
okay, then we need to vote on the chair, which should have took place in September.
Sure, yeah, we can go ahead and vote that if you need to.
I'll entertain a motion for anyone who would like to be the chair.
Like move Dean Ward be chair.
Second.
Do I hear any other nominations? If not, we'll proceed forward. I've got a first, nomination and I got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. All right, let's go to new business number 6 on the agenda tonight. Item number 8, please, Cameron.
Yes, sir. So in the staff report, you can see that this is a request to rezone a 0.451 acre lot around 20,000 square feet at 305 Washington Street from R7, which is high density residential, to B2 general business. The applicant wishes to use the existing house on the property in order to operate a commercial daycare. A home occupation daycare is an approvable use by right in the R7 zoning district, but limits the number of children to 5. The applicant wishes to have more than 5 and is why they are requesting the rezoning to the B2 classification. If approved, the daycare center would be licensed according to the state of North Carolina and as required by the city of Graham for commercial daycares. This property is listed on the future land use map as downtown residential. This land use area describes principal uses as detached single-family homes with supporting uses of place of worship, daycares, park facilities, schools, civic spaces, neighborhood-oriented commercial, small professional offices, live-work units, and home occupations, provided they do not generate excessive traffic and parking. The lot is surrounded by existing single-family homes on all sides of the residential block. The proposed use of the daycare on this lot falls in line with the land use plan, but the other uses inside of the B2 zoning district might not meet the same criteria. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Is Ms. Day here? Please step forward if. Cameron, if you would bring up an aerial picture of this address also.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Please state your name and address, please.
Sandra Day, 400 Poplar Street in Graham.
Thank you very much, ma'am. If you would, just tell me a little bit about what you're trying to do here and would like to do.
He basically said it all. Trying to open up a commercial daycare center because it has to be commercial to have more than 5 kids in the residence. So, we're just trying to get it rezoned and then go through the process to get that taken care of.
And how many is the maximum, children that you would like to keep there?
It depends on the square footage. I'm thinking around maybe 30, 35.
How many employees do you think you're gonna employ?
Probably anywhere from 7 to 10.
7 to 10. In, if it was approved, do you currently meet the, parking there? Parking places, do you have enough for staff and visitors? Do you,
Yes.
Amber, what's the requirement there? Is,
So the requirement for the daycare parking wise, of course, everything that's not residential is classified as a maximum amount that we can require. So it's really all based upon if they see that what they have out there is adequate enough per se. I don't know if there's any specific requirements for the ADA piece of it, but that's something that may be taken into account as well. But that's kind of the overall gist of the parking aspect of it at least. And I'll look at it a little bit further while you all continue and I'll follow back up.
okay, thank you. And do you propose to have a fence around the property, or is there a fence there now?
There is a fence already there that we'd be using for the play area. It's already there.
Okay, and what would be your hours of operation?
It all depends if I have first and second, but if I have just first, it'll be from 6:30 to 5:30.
And some of these questions that I'm asking you don't have a bearing, whether it's approvable or not. But we like to get an idea of what type of, how many infants do you think you're gonna allow to be staying there? And then how many would be, what's your age range?
The age group is going to be 6 weeks old to 12 years old. There would not be more than 5 infants.
Any other questions? Okay. And Ms. Strickland?
Is this an existing facility?
It is, it's an existing facility. We would go in and if the zoning is approved, we would go in and do what the state requires to make it acceptable for a daycare center.
When you mean existing facility, are you talking about, is there a daycare there currently or is the house already there?
The house already there?
Yes, sir. I don't,
Is it residential now?
Ms. Day, or is there a daycare operating there right now or is it
It's
just?
not, it's
Okay,
just the house.
Yeah.
It's just the house.
And how big is the house?
It is,
About 1,800 square feet. I own the property. I own the property. It's about 1,800 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths.
Please step forward and state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
My name is Ethan Lesperance, and I reside at 329 West Market Street, right next door to 305. I own both properties.
Thank you. If you want to just stand right there for a minute, might be some more questions
Yes,
for
sir.
you.
will you spell your last name, please?
Yeah, it's Lesperance.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Bass?
Nothing.
Mr. Strickland? Hey, Mr. Stocker, I'm sorry. Ganesh?
I have a couple of questions. One, ma'am, fencing around the property goes to the street of Washington and down to the cross street there. I'm not sure the name.
Market.
Market. Okay. The area that is grassed area to the right of that car, is that the area down there where that's fencing? Is that the area that would be used for play area? So there's quite a distance from there up to the house. And there's two buildings there. Are those buildings being used for anything other than storage?
At this moment, they're not.
Okay, the rearest, most, building in the back. Is there anybody living in that?
No.
Okay. Are you planning on using that for any purpose at all?
It all depends. If it's restructible, if we can go in and make it look good, we will. If not, that will be torn down.
It would be torn down?
We're not able to, if it takes too much work, that will come down.
Are you planning on fencing the rest of the area in, or do the children access from the back of the house?
They can access from that side or the back. It's when you go out the back of the house, there's a door to the fence or gate to the fence on the back side.
Is there any fencing between the house and that garage area?
May I speak on that, sir?
From the back of the truck, from that double garage there on the right to the left of the house,
There is,
there's a fence that runs across there?
yes, sir. Essentially, the children would not be able to leave that fence. Like, once they leave the back door of that house, there's no way for them to get outside of that fence without going through a gate.
Yeah, I guess my main concern is all the buildings that are in that area and the safety for the children that are in there. I'm concerned with that building in the middle, basically, is what I'm concerned with.
Yeah, Sandra and I spoke earlier, and basically the plan is to either update that building, if we find it necessary, or to completely eliminate that building. If that is a condition of the rezoning, I would be willing to go either route there.
Well, I guess you'd see my main concern is basically you're gonna have said somewhere in the approximate number of 30 children, if approved, then, and they're all ages, and so they're gonna be wandering everywhere. And how many, if you will, adults per child would you have at any given time?
Well, the state requires, it depends on the age level. For the infants, there would be one in the infant room. And for, I think, anywhere from 1 year to 2-year-old, you can have up to 10, but I'm not gonna have that many in a room. So it would be one in each classroom. And then there would be a couple of substitutes that would be able to come in and relieve as well.
So while they're outside,
So everybody wouldn't go outside at the same time. They would have different times that they went out. So it wouldn't be 30 kids outside at one time. They would have a set time, depending on their age group throughout the day to go out there.
and they would be well looked after by more than one person
That
outside.
is correct.
And your parking is the area between the two, between the double garage.
That is correct. And you're actually able to drive in one driveway and circle around and come out the other, because there's like 2 driveways there.
The grassy area separating the two driveways, is that what you're saying, or another access?
I mean, in the front, it's just like a driveway.
That little
and-
grassy area, there's a driveway there, a grassy area. So you're basically a crescent shape.
Yeah, they can like come in one way and go out the other.
In addition, sir, if we needed to add additional parking, there in the lower right-hand corner, next to the C329 West Market where I live, there's a gate. So go down to the street there, sir, to the left. You'll see just a little spot there. There's a double gate right there. So in the event that more parking needed to be added, there it is.
Is that on your property or? on-
I own both of those properties
I
there.
understand that, but is that gated area?
That belongs to 305.
Okay, that's the question.
Yes, sir.
And that lot is included in the 451 acres.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Huffman?
Can you tell me what the buffer would be between the B2 and the R7?
Yes, sir.
Follow up to that, can we get the dimensions? Rough dimension.
It looks like it's a type C buffer, but that's something that we'd have to determine whether or not new plantings would have to be planted out there since there's no new construction going on. There's a couple different standards that may come into play that either require them to install plantings or don't install plantings. And I think one of those is the change of the land use classification above, it's either 3 or 4, like changing of that. So them jumping from that 1 to the 2 may not require the plantings out there, but if it did, it'd be the type C, which is the 15-foot minimum width, 20-foot minimum average width, with 2 per 100 linear feet of canopy trees, 3 per 100 linear feet of understory trees, and 17 per 100 feet of shrubs. And your second question was the dimensions of the,
Yes, sir. If you could tell me what the dimensions of, or the rough dimensions of the property's perimeter, how far the house is off that north.
I don't know if I'm able to access any of that
From your
through.
GIS, you'll be able.
Well, this is the public version. I'll have to log into the other one. So if you'll give me a second, let me do that. I mean, we can kind of go from there. But your other questions, while you got them, we can go ahead and try and answer some of those as well. But let me log into the staff version. I'll be right back.
Chairman Ward, where I'm going with this, the current capacity under the R7 zoning allows 5 children, 25 bringing the total to 30 children. Require 900 square feet of inside space. Current state general statute says 30 children would require 75 to 100 square feet of outdoor play area. Size of the house footprint on the area. The parking required for staff would be 1 staff member for those 5 infants, and then the probably 3 additional employees. That's 4 employees. Parking area is. Question is then if the buffers are gonna become an issue. Adjacent uses. Issue for the.
Becomes a squeeze box.
Yes, sir. The plan that Ms. Sandra has here versus what's out.
Can you
I'm sorry,
explain-
Cameron, that's the reason I'm asking for.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. And I think something to keep in the back of our heads as well is, this is a general rezoning as well. And it's not conditional. So it was all be bearing upon their ability to meet the criteria after the fact, once they get the zoning requirements as well. But I do get where you're coming from, and I'm trying to get it pulled up, but I don't have access to the staff GIS on this one. I don't think I can get to the measurements on the public version, so I might not be able to help you out in that regard.
So on alamance-nc.com, which would be our county GIS, you can agree to the terms when that pops up, and then look for the dimension tool be in the top right, corner of the menu tab.
I hardly ever use the Alamance County GIS, but I see what you're talking about now. Let's see.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Would the garage, will that factor into parking spaces as well, in addition to the drive there, the Crescent Drive that we spoke about earlier?
Would it,
So I think we're discussing the ability to park vehicles, correct? So you've got a garage, a 2-car garage. Is that getting factored into the parking dimensions?
if that is the primary use of that
It-
garage?
Yes, it will be. I don't think Sandra plans to use it as anything else, so it could, certainly two parking spots there. And I don't know, Sandra lives just across the street, so I don't know if this will factor in, but she essentially won't need to park a vehicle there. She literally lives across the street, so she'd walk to work. So I think we're looking at 8 parking spots between the 2 in the garage and then 4 cars behind the garage doors. And then still the ability for parents to drop their kids off safely off of the street when they do drop.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that as well, as I mentioned before, the ordinance for commercial or pretty much non-residential is maximum. So there may be a different requirement that trumps ours in the form of whatever the state requires for the daycare requirements that we may not. So if the state says they have to have 9 parking spaces out there, then they'll have to come up with the 9 parking spaces in order to get their licensing. But Mr. Huffine, I do have this pulled up correctly now, I believe. So will you run through one more time what you needed me to look at?
Okay, on the north property line, the east property line, what are the lengths of those lines? They're adjacent to what would be R7 if this were to be rezoned. So the length of the north property line and the length of the eastern property
So you
line.
got 16.7 feet from the northern side. And
Total distance. don't-
Yeah, we're trying to do the total length of the yards first.
oh, so you want it like,
Corner to corner.
And these are approximate. This is not a survey. We're just trying to make sure we,
Of course.
122 for the north line. For the eastern line, you're looking at around 169, 170, probably closer to it.
and then the 8-foot street yard is typical for this.
Yeah, and like I said, that really depends upon if the use in there, if it meets that criteria of requiring new landscaping. I'll need to see if I can pull that requirement up because
Before you leave the county GIS, what is the dimension from the north wall of the home to the north property line?
I think that one,
16.6.
yeah, it was about
16
16
feet.
feet, I think. is
Okay,
what I
that
have,
was the 16 feet.
Ish, so.
And
in
the
that-
setback in a B2 would be 0, I guess.
That depends. If it's budding residential, it changes a little bit. But in this case, it'd be one of the non-conforming situations, whereas it's a non-conforming structure according to what it is. So it remains based on whatever the criteria is right now. But if it were to be, demoed and new construction, that's when we're talking more or less about, okay, you're gonna have to install plantings, meet setback requirements for this stuff now as well. But as it currently stands, I think that's where we kind of look at it in that point of it now being a B2 with an existing non-conforming structure on it. That is being used for permitted use in the district. And if they were to want to build anything additional, then they'd have to meet the requirements of the ordinance.
So would the change in use require the nonconformity to come back to us?
No, sir, I don't
Okay.
believe so. Because once it stays there as a non-conforming, it just, I'd be the same if you took a R7 lot or R7 lot and rezoned it to R18 for whatever reason. You wouldn't make them meet those R18 setbacks with the existing structure that's out there. I don't know if that's a good example or not, but
Yes.
it's just the first thing that comes into my head. But let me see if I can look at the landscaping piece of it, because that's a really good question that I want to make sure I get answered for you, Mr. Huffman. Yeah, so right here, this changes in use which result in an increase of 2 or more in the land use classification number. So that's where it would come into play. And since they're going from a 1 to a 2, they wouldn't be required to install any landscaping. I knew it was in here somewhere. I couldn't remember which number it was though.
Points of egress on the house, just the front door and the back door. Only 2 doors to the house, or is it 3?
There's a front, a back, and a side currently. Speaking,
Side faces towards the garage.
yes, sir. I believe that Sandra and I
There.
discussed that they're gonna require more egresses, depending on the
More
layout.
egresses.
So we would put those in.
What type of system did you use? This has no bearing on this, but to heat that house with.
Oh, it's central heat and air, sir. Yes, sir.
I was just curious.
Cameron, if you would, pull that zoning map back up. I got a couple more questions too.
Yes, sir. Let me get back over to it. Been bouncing around. I apologize.
That's okay.
All right, here you are. It's this piece of
So-
property right here.
So we got a house on the right side of this parcel, a house on the left side of this parcel, and houses straight across. There's no other businesses there. There's a duplex next door. I think, on up Washington Street, there's a duplex, but there's no other businesses or located there on Washington after you get past Steve's, is it?
No, sir. So I think this is Steve's right here.
Right.
And you know, if we take a look at the future land use layers, this is why you see these commercial areas right through here is because this is your focused commercial. Then it turns into that downtown residential. A lot of that has to do with it being right up there on West Hardin Street. And I think that's one of the things that I noted in the staff report as well as understanding the difference between the two. Because I mean, yeah, it is close in proximity, but there is a line that's drawn.
Cameron, can you bring up the street view again, please?
Yes, sir.
I want to take a look at that, the empty lot.
This one back over here.
Yeah. You got a large tree there. Middle of that, several small trees. What's the plan for those trees at this point? Are you gonna have to take those out to make room for the kids to play? You gonna leave them? What's the,
They're gonna stay. For one, it provides shade, so they have to have shade. I'm gonna have a shelter, but it also provides shade.
I can elaborate a little bit too there, sorry. I've owned the property now for just a little over a year. The pecan tree will definitely stay. As per the smaller ones, I think they're fruit trees. So it'll kind of depend on the health of those trees. But we are I would like to preserve them. I think Sandra would too. So far, they've made pretty good fruit, so keeping them, I think, is beneficial.
Cameron, this question for you, you made note the last statement in your summary. Other uses inside the B2 zoning district might not meet the same criteria.
Yes, sir. So when sorry.
Explain that a little bit further, please.
So I think it's, you know, when you're looking at the grand scheme of things, neighborhood residential or not neighborhood residential, but downtown residential does include that aspect of daycares. And also mentions things about, what did it say? Something about home occupations provided they do not generate excessive traffic and parking. So that daycare aspect of it is something that would fit into the current scheme of that downtown residential aspect. But once you rezone it to the B2, you know, that opens up the gate for gas stations, convenience stores, other things of the like that might not fall into the criteria of what is appropriate inside of the neighbor or the downtown residential future land use district. So I just wanted to at least make that note, and I think is a lot of the reason behind the staff recommendation as well. And I can elaborate a little bit further if you need me to, or if that answers your question.
That does answer the question, but please go ahead and elaborate.
Yeah, so I think they're coming to you with the specific request that they want to get the B2 zoning for the daycare use in specifically. And you could grant them the B2 zoning classification with that in mind that they're going to keep it, but 2-3 years down the road, daycare stuff doesn't work out. The B2 zoning's there, so somebody could come and build, like I said, convenience stores, gas stations that would not be heard by any of us. It'd just be looked at a staff and technical review level. And so that is one of the reasons, like I said, it was noted as well, as you have to kind of take into the aspect of the future thing, which I think y'all have done a good thing of doing in the past as well when a lot of these things have come up. So that's just, like I said, one thing I wanted to note at least.
I did have another question about the parking. If you could pull up the street view of the parking, the garage, go around the corner there. Your intention is to use the two driveways for a drop-off point, correct?
Correct,
For kids,
correct.
parents, okay. I'm having a little trouble seeing where you're going to put, I see two cars in the garage, but you were saying 4 more cars in front of the garage?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I guess I didn't take into account that that would be a turnaround point. So I guess what I'm seeing there is, certainly 2 in the garage, and then at least 3 across the front of that garage, still giving you access to the side door there and a turnaround point.
So I'm also looking what Ms. Day said earlier about possibility of 10 employees. Provided, so
Possibility.
you're gonna be walking across the street.
Only
That's
walk-
still possibility of 9 cars on site at a time. So I'm wondering where you're gonna put 9 cars.
I live across the street, so we have a double driveway as well. If some staff needed to, if you can pull it up, it's just right across the street. We have a double driveway as well. Back the other way. It's the 400 on down, right here. So now all of this is paved now, so we have this driveway as well. And that's where, I currently reside. And like I say, it's just right across the street.
Cameron, there would be no problem with them using a residential lot for parking?
So, as I mentioned, a lot of what our ordinance requests and requires is the maximum number. So I could only say we're gonna provide this number of, so their maximum requirement is 1 per employee. And it also mentions inside the ordinance that they can go, I guess, away from that requirement if the developer or owner sees fit. So they could say that we're providing this amount over here. Now, I don't know what it means whenever they're getting their state certification, if all have to be on site. But I think it could be looked at in a way where it could be utilized because it's not really taken into account, whereas the only thing that's taken into account is what's on the property currently and the maximum that they're providing over there. So they just can't exceed that 9 or however many employees on this site specifically or laid out on the site specifically. And if they choose to put them on other ones, the only thing that I could possibly think of is there is some stuff inside of the development ordinance that mentions, was it parking and driveways and parking and uses not permitted. If I can find it. Might have passed it already. Oh, yeah, parking lot service uses permitted in the zoning district. Parking lots and access driveways serving uses not permitted in district where a lot is located. That's the special use permit, but I think that'd have to be something that we'd have to do a little bit more looking into, like I said, based on, I don't know exactly how it would work, because like I said, they wouldn't technically have to say that we're utilizing this space over here because they only maximum is required on that lot is the number of employees. So they could say that we're just utilizing 5 spaces over here for the 9 employees that are going to be here. That's just how our ordinance is written, is really weird. And not really say that we're utilizing this space over here, but we're going to utilize that space over there. So, but that might be something that we have to look into if this is approved and see if it would be something that calls for a special use permit approval since they're utilizing that parking area. So that's where the interest of minimum maximum parking gets a little gray that we'd have to kind of figure out. So. Yes, sir.
Cameron, if they were to, something was to happen, they tore this building down as a B2,
Mhm.
what's the maximum height that someone could build something there?
Maximum height, you said 50 feet.
So roughly a 3 or 4 story building.
Let me see. Let me make sure I'm saying that correctly. Don't quote me yet. I kind of said it pretty fast. No, so even in the B2, there actually is not a maximum building height. But a lot of that would be based upon, I think, for buildings that 50 feet in height is the minimum, or not really a minimum, but there's not a minimum. But if they go over the 50 feet, they have to provide additional setback in the forms of this kind of blurb right here. For buildings over 50 feet in height, 1 foot of additional front yard depth is required for each 2 feet of height over 50. So that's kind of what we hold that standard to be, is if they want to go over 50, then they're going to have to provide extra front setback space.
As a B2, they could put, where they have to go into that world, as a B2, someone could put in a 3-story building, basically.
If they can meet the requirements of the ordinance, like I said, that'd be something that we'd have to look at during the technical review process, but we'd have to make sure that it meets all the standards. But if you want to speak hypothetically, then if they could make it work, then yes, they could. I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah, I'm happy.
okay.
And can I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
And another thing, if that, that building, is not able to be, I guess, restored, then if we tear that down, that's some additional parking as well.
We wouldn't probably consider that as parking there because where the kids gonna be the playing areas, the whole backyard, or you gonna limit them
No,
over?
I'm not talking about in the backyard, but the building that you guys had asked about earlier.
That's in the backyard though, is it not? And it's behind the house.
Well,
I think it would, I think what she's saying, sir, is if you zoom into that picture there, if that building wasn't there, you could fit additional cars next to the garage there between the house and the garage, if needed. And obviously we could put a limit on to how far back those cars could drive before they were impeding on child space, right? So, because that garage or that building there basically completes a portion of the fence. So if that building was removed, there would have to be a fencing that would have to go there, which we could limit the distance that the cars were able to pull in there.
Cameron, show aerial.
Yes, sir. Is that good?
Yes.
So I think what he's kind of saying is the fence line looks like it runs pretty much like, I think this is the gate right here.
Correct.
So you take this away, the gate would probably extend, either connect over here and you got a little bit more room back through here, I think is what he's getting at. But just seeing it in the overview probably helps a little bit.
Anything further? Let's talk.
Cameron, is there a residential zoning that allows for more than 5 children?
No, sir.
No.
I believe the only thing that allows for the more than 5 children or no, excuse me, the only other classification is that 5 or less. Or let me, before I start talking again, let me get it pulled up on the table of permitted uses so I don't contradict myself. So,
My direction is to try to find a residential zoning that allows for more than 5 children.
yes, sir. So it looks like daycare center child, because it's that home occupation piece of it that I was discussing in that future land use plan, and what it states here in the table of permitted uses is the daycare center child operated as a home occupation 5 or less, and see note 20, and those can be done in every single residential criteria. And I think note 20 here on the extra section over here is centers shall meet the standards established by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. At least 200 square feet per child of completely enclosed fenced outside play area, not including drives, parking areas, or land otherwise unsuited shall be provided. So that's the only other option here. If you're wanting to do it without getting approval from anybody else, is kind of how they'd have to operate.
Anything further? Thank you.
I have a question. With the B2 zoning, I mean, is a concerned, I mean, I own the property again. With the B2 zoning in the future, you guys talked about 3 to 5 years from now, and I think the big concern is if somebody would build like a convenience store or more than 50-foot tall building. My future plan for that property, if this doesn't work out for Miss Day, is to actually put another residence in that big open lot there on the road. Would the B2 zoning prevent me from building another single family home in that area if I wanted to do that? I spoke with Evan, I believe. Who's that? Isn't Evan here?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So on the phone, and I think from what I understood on the phone with him is I would still be, it would be permissible as in the future with the B2 zoning. So that is my only concern, is if that is, indeed accurate.
So Evan was correct. You can build another house on there. The only thing, that you would have to do is you would have to subdivide the land out there.
Okay.
And basically create two lots. You couldn't build an existing or a new house out there on the same lot as the existing structure. So we'd have to review your minor subdivision plan and make sure that it meets all the requirements according to the ordinance. And that includes like getting a survey done and everything and showing where the lines are being drawn, distances and everything else. So it's possible with the B2 classification, but there we just have to go through that subdivision process.
Awesome. But I think if there's any concerns about that property, I don't plan on selling that property anytime soon. I'd like to just continuously improve that corner. I think Washington Street is doing really well. It's blowing up. Right. So improvements are all I'm after, and I don't really plan on selling that or having a convenience store or a 50-foot tall building or anything like that. Just if that eases anybody's concerns. I mean, I know we're following a guideline here, but just PSA.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll close the public. Is anyone else here who'd like to speak on the public hearing? Okay, I'm gonna close the public hearing now. And we'll have discussion between staff and ourselves. Cameron, this is a straight rezoning request for the B2. And certainly I understand, that if we drop B2 right in the middle of a residential neighborhood, that we're creating more nonconformity than it already is, there.
Yes, sir. And I think that's where, as I mentioned, the recommendation comes in line is, you can never guarantee anything, I guess, per se. So that's kind of where it has to be looked at. And like I said, I think we all done a pretty decent job of looking at it that way in the past as well. So
Was there any discussion about special use or?
I think the aspect of the conditional rezoning was mentioned, and this avenue was one that was taken. I would have to double check with Evan to make sure, but I mean, after phone calls and discussions that we had with the applicant and property owner, I think it was mentioned that the conditional would be your better way to move down this path, but this one is the one that was chosen overall, so.
Yeah, the discussion was had about conditional rezoning, and as Keith had stated, where he owns the property and would want to be able to build a home there and subdivide it when he pleases and not come back before planning board and city council to change the conditional rezoning. They went for the straight B2 rezoning.
Thank you, Evan.
Thanks. Any discussion, Mr. Huffines?
Just to be clear, conditional zoning was mentioned. Conditional zoning was mentioned and chosen, not chosen.
Mr. Benesh?
It's just concerning, not to be against the request as far as a daycare, because I'm sure it's needed. It's the fact what we're doing to a residential area by one lot, zoning it to business, which creates a problem for a lot of other issues that may pop up in that particular area, and it changes the dynamics. It's very concerning.
Thank you. Mr. Wood?
I have some concerns about the parking. I think it's very innovative and clever use, be able for Ms. Day to use the available parking at her house to take care of the employees. But it may be in the future that she's not always going to be the owner and or director of the daycare. It may come to another person, and that might not be available. So I don't think that's a wise path to go down. I'm also very hesitant to put B2 zoning in here. And I think it would offer the possibility of opening Pandora's box, so to speak, in future years. Hopefully, wishing you all the best in the endeavor in the daycare, but we don't know how long that would last. And that B2 zoning could be used for a number of other things.
And it runs with the actual property, not the business itself.
Right. It goes with the property, not the business.
Mr. Bass?
I like the idea of the daycare. I think it fits within our descriptions of uses of property in that area, in this part of town. Zoning seems like it'd be more appropriate
Yes.
than a straight B2 designation. In the future, we don't know. They all mean well, but in the future, things change and we don't know what will happen. So I'm challenged by that.
I concur. Don't have anything new to say. I just concur.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Can we discuss,
No, public hearing is closed right now.
sorry.
Maybe I can assume or think where you was going. Cameron, if they withdrew at this point,
Mhm.
they could still come back if they could meet the criteria next month for potentially, if they could get their stuff in, that where they got, 2 weeks before they'd have to have it in. I don't know that they could get it all done.
Yeah, so I mean, deadline for next planning board items is in 6 days.
6
so
days.
25th. It wouldn't be an issue with withdrawing because it's a different rezoning request, right? Like it's not, it'd be one thing if it was the same rezoning or requesting a rezoning for the same classification or whatever it may be, but since it's going to the rezoning to a conditional, it wouldn't have that 6-month wait period if that's what's that distinction between the two. If you have the rezoning, you withdraw it, or it may even be either withdrawn or denied, that you have to wait the 6 months to come back for the same request for the same lots. But since it's going to be the conditional, they'd be able to do it. But it still comes with, of course, the aspect of, you probably need to see a site plan of some sorts, due to the fact that it sounds like, I mean, a big topic of discussion would be the parking. Where are we going to put the parking? That would probably be one of the big things that they'd have to go through. And it's of course, a financial endeavor, and the technical review committee would also have to take a first glance at it too. So I mean, you're looking at probably, I mean, I don't even know, it could be done for I don't think it'd be done for the April meeting, but the May meeting probably could be done.
It'd be pushing it.
Yes, sir.
I hope that was maybe where you was headed. I just hope that maybe helps you there. Whether we take a position on it tonight or not take a position on it, if it's not approved, you still can come back when you have the appropriate paperwork for a different type of zoning. You wouldn't have to wait any period of time as long as you could meet the deadline of the cities of getting it in, whether it would be the upcoming month or the following months down the road.
I think it may be, worth noting as well. I mean, regardless of, I guess, kind of where it's at, but there is another step to the process, right? I mean, if you do want to kind of continue this on the city council, then, I mean, I don't want to, say you guys aren't the final decider, of course,
Right.
but just of course want to throw that out there because I don't know if that was something the applicant was aware of or not.
And even like what Cameron was saying, whatever action we take tonight, it still goes to city council next month and they have the final say of what the outcome would be, whether it would be approved or not approved. Having said that, I'll just entertain a motion and, we'll move forward and they can, if they choose to do anything after it leaves here, they can still do what we talked about.
Yes, sir. Of course, that'll come through, I guess, if however they may, we'll talk about it during normal working hours.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to deny the request for the rezoning of the B2. That it is not, I don't have that language in front of me, so. Does not, yeah, I ain't got my glasses, daggone. Can't see it.
It's all
I
good.
gotta read it, but I can't see it. that based on the B2 rating does not conform with the parking and based on that information and does not fit the Graham 2035 Comprehensive Plan, City of Graham Development Ordinance. The proposed use of the daycare is consistent with the land use plan, but the zoning itself holds the uses that would not be consistent with the surrounding uses, zoning, and land use plan.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Good luck, with council, or potentially if you choose to come back with something different, if you don't go to council, or you can still go to council either way and still come back with a potential another option. All right. Number 7, is there any public comment from the audience on non-agenda items? All right, don't look like it is. And any staff comment?
No, sir. I don't know if it's necessarily on here, but of course I'd peek you all and see if there's anything of discussion amongst y'all, if y'all have any comments on anything. I will note, Mr. Jerome, I did reach out to the assistant city manager, and he's getting in touch with the public works director to get that manhole cover fixed, so.
And does anybody have any non-agenda items here they'd like to discuss with staff or the board?
And do we have an update on the,
Special use stuff. So it went in front of, I figured that's where you're going with it. It went in front of city council, and I think it's just, we're gonna keep it as is. Burlington operates in that one meeting manner. Mebane operates in the 2 meeting manner. So they do it the same way that we kind of have it listed out, as it's a legislative hearing first. Whereas they don't have to be sworn in or anything. They can just come in and present comments. There's still a little bit of, I think we can still make recommendations, but one of the notes in the general statutes, is that city council should not base their consideration or final decision off of planning board, I guess, recommendations or some sort. It says something like that in the general statute. So as of right now, we're going to keep the special use how it is. We'll be able to hear it, make recommendations, and it will be provided to city council, but ultimately it states in the general statute that they should not base their decision solely off of what I guess we all heard, mainly due to the fact because it's a legislative hearing that we would have the first time. And when it goes in front of them, it's quasi judicial, and bringing in information or evidence that's in that legislative part of it may make a little bit of an issue in the quasi judicial sense. So that's kind of, I guess, where it was left off with city council. It's still that whole power, not necessarily power, but decision-making piece of it is like, you hear it, you make a recommendation. Can it be really even taken into consideration? That's how it's kind of been held this whole time. So we're going to keep on doing it how it is, and we're going to let y'all make recommendations and go from there.
Some of the comments that council made that night, I was at the meeting, was it would be informative. Sometimes we get information out that helps the council ask more questions when it gets brought before them, and that it would be informative to them for us to hear it, to continue as is. Anything further? Just talk about?
I have one thing for Cameron.
Yes, sir.
I think it was back at the end of the year last year, we'd send up a question to you guys to look at the landscape island square footage requirement.
Yes, sir.
You remember that one?
I do remember that one, and it was one of those times when we weren't necessarily meeting back and forth, and it was brought up. It's like if we're looking at doing some updates to the ordinance, maybe consider this as well. And I didn't really take it as put this on the agenda item for us to discuss, and more or less something that we bring up in a setting like now when we maybe, or not maybe, but look at it and then put it on the agenda for discussion. But I should have reached back out but in a setting like this, I think it'd be informative to figure out exactly what it is that you're requesting or informing. So that way, if it is a matter of what the planning board may see fit, that we can make it as a request to put on the next agenda item for you all to look at.
I'll just tell my colleagues kind of what we discovered then, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. And do you remember what the subsection was? I can pull it up since I got the ordinance up right
It's
now.
in 10.270, I guess would be the place to start. Recently, we were working through a parking lot design. The city's landscape ordinance requires that we place a canopy tree within the area of 12 parking spaces, so that a tree is located every 12 spaces and so on. A parking space in the city of Graham is about 200 square feet. When you look at the way the ordinance was written, the planting area required for a landscape island in a parking lot should fit into a parking space. You just would leave the parking space out, put the landscape island in its place so that you have a pattern of 10 feet wide parking spaces and then a 10-foot wide landscape island and so on. And what we found is if you put curb and gutter in that landscape island, you reduce the allowable square footage for planting such that it's small, the planting area is too small to meet the ordinance, which then requires you to extend the size of the island, throwing off the pattern of your 10-foot parking spaces. So I guess in an example, I might have 10-foot wide parking spaces. The author or the code creator anticipated we would put a tree there and then continue on with 10 more spaces. But dimensionally, we would need to make that landscape island about 12 or 13 feet wide as opposed to 10 feet wide, because the square footage requirement and the width requirement don't mesh. When we found that, I just dropped a note to Cameron, could we discuss that and try to iron that out so that it's consistent for other projects going forward?
Okay. Sorry, I was just pulling up the email. I was trying to figure out, make sure I was looking at the right space so I could point it out in the ordinance so I could read exactly. So 10.75C is this, dimension of planting areas. Each planting area containing trees, including those located in parking lots, shall have a minimum inside dimension of 7 feet and be at least 200 square feet in area. It's interesting, I guess.
So mathematically, a 10-foot space, a 20-foot space is what we build everywhere. Gives you the 200 square feet. But the 7-foot dimension, not quite sure where that came from.
So you're talking about like the width wise has to be 7 or
One of the two has to give.
okay.
Otherwise, we will exacerbate the problem with every future site plan that comes through with an odd shaped island that doesn't necessarily repeat aesthetically with the way the parking lots lay out. The code requiring 200 square feet, the writer probably envisioned, I'm going to omit a space and put an island there.
Mhm.
And in my mind, that's an equivalent area. 200 square feet of parking came out, 200 square feet of planter came in. But if the width is 7 feet, the placement of curb and gutter create the island and keep the mulch from falling on the parking lot. Depending on the width of the curb, whether it's 18-inch standard curb all the way up to 30-inch standard curb, could take as much as 5 feet out of the island. If you use standard curb and you use curb all around the perimeter of that island, 30 inches and 30 inches is 5 feet. That leaves you with a 5-foot wide planter island, which is not what the code writer likely intended when they required the 7-foot width. So when you use 18-inch curb, you have curb in that perimeter, you have a 10-foot space minus 3 feet of curb, you now have the 7-foot minimum.
Mhm.
But you no longer have the 200 square foot minimum requirement.
Because you're losing that curb area that's not considered in that 200 square feet.
Correct.
Okay. I see what you're talking about now.
Something has to happen, and the solution is that the square footage match the size of the island? Or the dimension, the minimum dimension match the size of the island to achieve what I think the code writer's intent was at the time? And we just happened to find it because our parking lots weren't working out.
Yeah, so this is just, I guess, general back and forth, of course, that do you see the inside dimension of 7 feet? That's like between the curb and gutter, right? Because your parking space, of course, is gonna be longer. You're talking about that 7 feet right here or 7 feet this way?
The width.
Okay, so that's, well, they could both be considered the width, I guess. So, yeah, let me, that's interesting. I'll have to, well, it sounds like the math doesn't work out on y'all's front. I don't know if there's another way it was looked at in that regard, or if it was just something that was a general oversight.
Probably never thought about the curb.
Yeah, and that could be the case where if they wanted just to, the curbing was included the whole time. It's like, so I don't know how it's necessarily been looked at in the past. And honestly, until Mr. Huffine brought it up, it was kind of a wayward thought in my head as well. So, how would y'all like to proceed? I mean, I can do a little bit of investigating on my end. If there's a better solution, Mr. Huffine, that you all think that could be moved, then I guess it could be something that the planning board kind of brings up and moves forward. Because I mean, it's still that same old aspect of, I don't know how they feel about staff bringing forth text amendments, things along those lines. But if it comes from you all directed, then it might be a little bit different. So I don't know if you already had kind of a draft written up of like what would work out the best in your mind, and then we can get it on the agenda for next month. And I'll also, in the meantime, look for some clarification if there is any in that regard, and then kind of go from there, and we'll talk about it and hopefully get it changed in the next 2 months.
We can certainly get the language submitted to you for review.
Yes, sir. That would be awesome if that's all right with everybody else, of course.
But good thing we got an engineer on here with us.
I know he's an asset, that's for sure. So he asks all the good questions, make you work. So
Take your word.
Anything
Want to
further?
Go home.
Anybody got anything else? All right, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.